Does everything look good? All right, got it.
Welcome to Dark Sorcery. I'm Alfredo Martinez, and I have with me Guion Hughes. Guion, good to have you back on.
Thanks, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And today we're going to be talking about the Goetia, studying the Goetia. And I have with me here the Goetia of Shadows by Michael W. Ford. And excuse me, Guion has some books of his own he'd like to show off.
Yeah, so I'll go through the progression kind of. This is one I believe this came out in the 90s, and it goes through all the the process of everything. This is part 2, so I think this is more of a practical like workbook, which that's that's good for some people. This is the old one that Aleister Crowley did. It's got his drawings in it, and it's the old translation. It's got all the same thing. It's kind of a workbook, but it's just like 100 years old, and it's kind of like transliterated. So I've got the book that I really like to recommend is this one by Aaron Lynch, and it's about all the grimoires and not just the Goetia. So yeah, I've got a few books I wanted to show off. This one's really cool. This is actually a reproduction of a book that they had where a book of spirits, and it shows what an actual grimoire looked like. Like this is 1583. So they just had the names of the spirits. They didn't tell you like how to do it, because these names were like profane. So somebody would just use this book and just be calling the spirits and learn about their hierarchy and say, hey, I know you and I know Lucifer, and so I can tell you what to do. So things like that. I've done a lot, but I really like that you have that book. I haven't actually read that book yet, but I'm sure that it's got very the 72. We're dealing with the 72 spirit.
It does. It does. What sets it apart is I like the artwork in it. It's got some very, very nice artwork of the deities themselves, and he also has I like his approach and his commentary to it. But yeah, considering the Goetia, you had done some videos, a video or two on your channel and on your TikTok, mentioning that you call it medieval Christian shamanism.
Yeah, that's how I look at it. I mean, I look at it like it's a path working. It's almost like you're reaching out to like a pantheon of gods, like the Greek gods or the Roman gods, and or the Egyptian gods or the Hindu gods. It's a pantheon of these spirits. Some could call them angels, because there's 72 angels on one side, and half of the system is noted as half of the system is noted as calling angels, and coming from a place that's like totally different than we're coming from modernly, I believe. So that a lot of these books are kind of obsolete, because even 100 years ago when Aleister Crowley wrote this, people were still had a different idea about demons, and even Crowley himself puts it in here and says that it's all psychological to him. He believes that it's all parts of our mind and things like that. But people still have reservations about this, and there's ways. I always encourage people to get a good educational background in what these spirits are, who they are, how to pronounce their names, and things like that. So when you do, so first of all, they'll come to you and they'll know that you've done your research, just like a job interview or something. And then you also, won't be tricked by them, because you'll know some things, and they'll know that you're savvy enough not to be tricked or told to do things that you don't, necessarily want to do, or possibly become one of their servants or their god, or their, because these were gods from other cultures originally. So there's a lot of work, I think pre-work that should be done, as much as people feel comfortable with before they get into this stuff. And then, whatever book they read, I'm sure it's great. It's just make sure people know how to ground, make sure people how to banish, keeping somewhat of a magical hygiene, I think is good for this stuff. Usually, people get their own speaking in tongues, their own language, like Enochian kind of thing, a personal language from spirits. I got that when I was, so the incantations, don't matter so much to me, but it might matter a lot to somebody else, because that's just how they're wired, that's just how their practice is. Maybe they're all into the symbols and they want to get it all right, which is great, and these books, especially, Golden Dawn based books like this one by Aaron Leach actually does go, he wants to get it right. He gets the astrology right, everything, making the talismans, and all that kind of stuff. So it's it's an intense path working, and I love it. You know, I love the different interactions and different things. It's almost like it's almost like I take it almost like it was like a video games we have nowadays, but they didn't have them back then. So they have a way to like play, you know, and all these symbols and all this stuff. It gets people's minds.
You could say it was like a code book with some missing steps or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is what the philosophy behind this too is a lot of people that were doing this like 100 years ago, even in Aleister Crowley's time, you know, like 100 years back or you know, less, you know, in the early 20th century, they still probably maybe had reservations about that they were doing wrong things, about demons, about the ideas of demons. You know, I mean, there wasn't a big renaissance, you know, and then on top of that, that's why this book only came out like 2003. These books, these really like in-depth books about the occult, they were blocked, and people didn't really do them because of satanic panic and because of just the stigma in general, you know, that it's just you're conjuring demons. And you know, there's a lot of texts that don't get translated from Arabic or ancient Latin well because they don't think it's worth it, because if they say it's magic, it's just superstition, it's nonsense, you know. So there's a lot of there's a renaissance with people, you know, getting into the grimoires, being able to translate the grimoires, being able to watch videos on YouTube and understand the grimoires, which just never would happen in the past. You know, it was hard to get a hold of any of this kind of stuff. This was like a big breakthrough in the 90s, I believe, when I got a hold of this and was able to get this. And he has a part one for sure, because this is part two. But getting into it, like I said, if you get a background and then you approach these spirits, you know, understanding that people get hung up on the results of it, and then a lot of times they'll scare themselves and then they'll just get out of it. So people have to do a balance. I mean, do they really want a spirit to appear when they appear, you know, when they appear to people like you know, like this, you know? I mean, I don't know. You really want, you know, you really want a you know, a crazy looking guy with a dog head, huge penis, you know what I mean? I mean, that's just, you want that to appear in front of you? I don't. I mean,
I'm good. I'm good on that.
Which that's why they have the circle. You know, that's why they have the circle in the first place. The idea is that these things, you conjure them, you talk to them, but it's almost like, you know, a lot of times in the past, you got to pray and do all this stuff. So these people were doing this as a guilty conscience. They're like, okay, like, it's like, you know, I usually go to church, but I'm going to go to the bar and hang out with the gangsters, or hang out with the people that sell illegal things or whatever. And I'm just going to do that, and, you know, say kind of a guilty pleasure, or maybe I have to because I got no other, you know, recourse. I've got somebody's going to kill my son or something, and I got to go get gangsters help. And that's just, it's kind of like they consider it kind of like a guilty thing, which I don't think modernly we look at it that way. And I'm guessing in the book that you use by Michael Ford, he doesn't really take that approach as these are bad entities, and they're, you know, they're meant to be controlled. And you know, like Solomon in the original myth, they describe how he conjures Asmodeus, and he beats him, and he tortures him, and he burns his sigils, and he just does all these bad things to him to try to keep him in control. And then once he has him in control, he sends him to control the other demons. So that's not the way I approach it. And I think modernly, these don't, you know, it's not like that, you know? Yeah,
me either. I mean, now you personally do not believe that it was authored by King Solomon.
Yeah. I don't. Yeah, it wasn't. It's in the Middle Ages. That's why I call it medieval shamanism. It's in the Middle Ages. You know, it's like the Bible. You know, like, did Adam and Eve really happen? I mean, can you bring Adam? Can you bring Eve? Can you bring God? Can you bring the dragon or the serpent or whatever? These, you know, is Moses real? I mean, if I said, all right, Moses wrote this originally, I mean, can I prove it? Not really. You know, can we even? Moses wrote the 5 books of the Bible. You know, the Plutarch. We can't even really prove that Moses. They believe that even Genesis had multiple authors because of the writing styles. You know, so there's, you know, it's myth. It's Christian mythology. As the way I look at it, and you know, they created all these different. It is interesting how all these different ideas of spirits came, and some of them, you know, they obviously, you know, like Astarte was like a goddess, Babylonian goddess. You know. There's all these other, you know, Baal obviously was a god from other cultures. So most of these are just, you know, gods or deities that people looked at, or legends from other cultures, you know, that they put in together and said, well, we can like kind of look at it like, if you need some heavy lifting work, some real work, and that's where the Masons get this too. That's why this ties into Masonism is, the Masonic view is that there's Cain, and Cain was a Mason, was like more of a worker, right? He built things, he did things like that. And then Seth was more of like the priest, and the priest is more like a politician, a king, not very good,
Yeah.
So the Masons say they're sons of Cain, they're sons of the widow. They believe that Lilith was the widow, and Cain's first, Cain was from that, and all the workers, and which is the demons would be considered the workers, really, if you think about it, right? They're not these angels trying to like just tell people what to do or just adorate God. They're actually doing like heavy lifting. They're doing, even if they're doing bad things, they're doing like heavy work, and people that were Masons, when they were still based on the real Mason art of construction, that they identified with those demons for that, but they had to keep it on the DL, and it got mixed with the Gnostic Christianity, and that's why the Masons were so secretive, because they were preserving things that would be considered like witchcraft,
Yeah. Now, some Goetia books mention the ritual purification, such as preparing for it, like fasting for a day, taking a cleansing bath, burning herbs to cleanse your space, washing your hands. Now, some people also practice the Bornless ritual by Aleister Crowley. Do you personally do that?
I've read that before. It's a powerful poetry. Mostly how I get my stuff out is I've got, like I mentioned, the glossolalia, or speaking in tongues, which I also call Enochian, just so but it's my own personal Enochian, I guess I would say. I do that, and then a dancing, and then also that I do the incense, and I have like a temple and stuff. But I definitely think that there is value in the Bornless ritual and saying that. I think it's more of a religious thing, honestly. Anything with Aleister Crowley has become more of a religious thing, I think, But I mean, it predates Aleister Crowley. It is mistranslated though. So it's from the Magical Greek Papyri, and it's actually saying the headless one. So they were talking about a headless God, which they do have a headless God that's around. I don't have a picture of him right in front of me here, but there is a God that the Gnostics had. So they're saying headless one. They just changed it to Bornless because it sounded better. Really, basically, So, but which is all right. It still sounds cool or whatever.
It's fine.
That's more of a Thelemic thing, which we will do a show on Thelema. I think that's I always think of whenever I'm doing something just because it's Aleister Crowley did it, which is this is that. I think that I consider the Bornless ritual it being, it's like doing Resh. It's like doing it's following his instruction. I consider that more of a religious thing, and I don't really follow his religion anymore. But I do get the benefits of some of the things that he said, which I think that's saying poetry and stuff like that. I think writing your own poetry and doing it, or even writing it on Facebook. Modernly we do these things differently. We don't put out like books and stuff. We put out, we're all creators. We all could put out like our poetry on Facebook or Instagram or a picture or whatever, or dance. But dance is the big thing for me. Going out, being in the goth scene, and keeping it together and helping people out in the goth scene and the alternative scenes, just all the whole alternative scene in LA is a big thing for me.
Mm-hmm. Now, some people, it is good to for people starting out, for them to know, don't forget to banish. A lot of people tend to use the LBRP, Lesser Banishing Ritual, the pentagram. Another note is ritual timing. When doing this type of high magic, ceremonial magic, it's good to pay attention to the planetary days, the hours, and the moon phases, because I believe they do make a big difference, and their energy does count. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. I think timing's a lot. In this book, it goes into timing a lot. My girlfriend is an astrologer, and I always check with her, so I kind of cheat a little bit. I don't do that work, but she always does it. So I'll say, like, is it the timing right for this? The timing, but especially making the talismans. The whole idea, a lot of people believe the whole idea behind the talismans is that it's just they're being birthed at that time, at that moment.
Yeah.
So that's I think that the timing is right. You get the timing right. You get people have to understand that they have to think right, and they have to have the right philosophy towards this. If you're feeling guilty, or you're feeling like not right, or you don't believe it, or you're whatever, right? If you have doubts, you have lack of confidence, this stuff can like make things worse. It can it can make you kind of, you know, have what people would call mental health symptoms. You know, you think you're hallucinating. It can make you, you know, have obsessive thoughts. So, you know, I would say definitely banish. I would say that this is why, you know, these lodges and stuff exist. They want to give you an education, you know, like with the trivium and things like a classical education and an education in the classical liberal arts. So then when you do approach these beings, these spirits, you know, in these books, they don't, you know, they know that you know something about Western culture, you know. that's the idea behind it, you know, is like that Freemasons and the OTO and all that is they're preparing you, you know, which you know, like this doesn't seem like that much a big book, but I would say with the Thelemic Path, you know, this is written by you know, McGregor Mathers, edited by Aleister Crowley. But I would say Thelema would recommend that you also probably read or learn about this. You know, this is the big blue brick, they call it. This is like all of Aleister Crowley's books and stuff. So, you know, so that's a big thing. Oh, hold on for a second.
Yeah.
Here. Oh, I had to deal with my dog. I don't know what's wrong with him.
That's fine.
So anyway, yeah, I think the timing, I mean, there's different factors, you know, and we may even want to do another show on the practical. I almost, you know, I don't know if I want to even tell people how to do practically, because I mean, I want them to do, you know, go on their own journey and
well, yeah,
like
we'll do a separate video sometime on that. Now I do want to mention some quotes that Michael does use in this book. For instance, let me go, and if you go to page 56 at the bottom, it says, "Beware the union of the fluids of the sun and the moon, as it leads to a strong familiar, who for the inexperienced may cause mental stress for the magician." Now, I thought that was an interesting quote. If you go to
the moon, that means menstrual blood, and then I can
but I thought that was an interesting point he made. If you go to page 57 in the middle, he mentions about the black mirror. He says, "Some chaos sorcerers have created black mirrors from a piece of glass with black electrical tape on the reverse side. This proves efficient and inexpensive, as well as offering the same effect." So, you know, if you kind of, you know, if you want to be frugal, there's different ways you can go about it. You don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money on exactly what it says you need. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can go to the dollar store and I think they even had that in one of these horror movies. Like you could get a mirror at the dollar store and just spray paint it black, you know, and or something like that. You know, there's all kinds of ways that, you know. Yeah, I've made a few like homemade things. I don't know if I have my my scrying thing, but I mean, yeah, I've gotten things, you know, like this is one that we would use. I've got a lot of orbs and stuff. So scrying is you know, is key. You know, that's another key part of it. I think if you most of these spirits are going to be in your imagination, or you're going to see them in scrying or in smoke or something. You're not going to, like I said, you probably don't want them to come up, you know, up in your grill, you know.
Yeah, obviously. Some people, they have a different approach to it. Instead of like taking them literally, some people think that they're aspects of their subconscious, or that they're part of their shadow or their daemon, you know. I guess it all depends on the perspective, but as long as the results are there, I mean, it really doesn't matter.
I mean, for sure, I think results is the whole thing. I mean, like you could argue that they're tulpas, you know, like tulpa, the concept of tulpa is just you create, you know, it's like you create like a servitor or egregor, but you just act like it's there. Like you create your imaginary friend, essentially, right? A tulpa, like, you know, and this is a Tibetan concept, you know, so it's this tulpa, it's through the occult. You could argue that route. You could argue that it's just in your mind, you know, it's just a mental journey, which is what it's all about. I mean, what's not in our head, you know, everything we see is in our head originally, right? I mean, we see things and it doesn't, you know, it's not our eyes seeing, it's our brain seeing, it's in our head seeing it. So we have, you know, everything is things don't exist without our sensory input. So the whole idea behind it all, you know, a lot of people want to see these things. You could always say it's an hallucination, or you could always say, you know, people just, you know, I would say that it's more of like you said, like a path working psychological journey, and, you know, and learning things from these different entities. You could do the same thing with a different, you know, different thing like the Hindu gods, or another pantheon like the Greek gods. You could read Greek mythology if you wanted to, instead of doing this. Maybe if you wanted to make it to be a little bit less controversial, a little less dark. I mean, but Greek mythology is pretty dark too, you know. So you know, it got some pretty Greek mythology and Rome, you know, all that stuff. So you know, it is what it is. I mean, this is. I think it's fascinating to me. You know, I'd love to do more things on it. And love that it's being changed. You know, that's one of the things I was talking about this author about though, with being like so true to it. It's like if you're going on and talking about this on social media, then you're not being true. You know, that's not from the 1500s. If you're like making talismans like painstakingly by this old stuff in the 1500s, and then you ship it in UPS, I mean, you should be delivered by mule or something. You know, I mean, that's the thing. You know, we're in a modern context. Everything's. I think in my first video we did, I said everything's going to be. It's going to be an amalgamation between who we are now as modern human beings with all this technology and everything, and what we want to bring into our lives and how we process it, basically. You know, but it's always going to be different. We're not going to be a traditional Goetia like somebody did in the, you know, unless it's a play or acting. But then that's just you know, we're acting, you know? So that's the thing is, you know, this stuff is interesting history. It's interesting stuff. I mean, you do psychologically get things done, I think, and it is a good. But I think, you know, you train and then you go into these things, and it is good to have people around. I mean, I'm a solo practitioner, but it's not for everybody. But you know, like I said, I've had spirits around me since I was younger, so not everybody, you know. They should have a group probably to maybe try this.
Well, you mentioned about being a solitary practitioner. I mean, a lot of people just do it solitary, but you can do it, you know, as a group. And there are different Goetic books out there that will give you instructions, you know, on doing it as a group ritual. Mm-hmm. You don't necessarily have to do it solitary.
Oh yeah, I did Enochian in a group. Enochian is really good as a group. With Lon, you know, I used to go to these Monday night magic classes with Lon Milo Duquette, and he, you know, there would be about 12, 13 people show up, and everybody would just do, you know, the Goetia. The thing is when we got into the Goetia, it's like if you really want to do the way they did it, even you know, they inflamed themselves in prayer. You know, everybody was Christian. You know, even Crowley to a certain degree was doing prayer and going to angels and doing you know, more right hand path stuff, because they were fearing these demons still. They weren't embracing them like we do in the dark past, you know, which didn't exist back then so much. You know, I mean, even you know, it just didn't exist. So modernly, you know, we got to see you know, it's more like we're having relationships with these entities and not being hostile and not being like, I'm a Christian and I don't like you, and so but I'm just coming to you because I have to, or which has been in the past how this was approached, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I like how it's approached now, and you know, it changes the whole way that it works. I think, you know, it changes the stellar rays of how these spirits can do things and things like that. It's just, you know, because we have like plush toys of them now, you know. I mean, can you imagine having a little doll that would get you burned? Like even 100 years ago, that'd probably get you burned at the stake for having a plush toy of it. Now they sell them on Etsy, right? People get them. You know, have a living of selling plush toys made of the 72 spirits of the Goetia. So it's you know, it's an interesting. It's good once people get these symbols in their heads. I mean, and they just, you know, like you said, they could look online or they could look on YouTube and get a baptism process. I mean, basically, there's one pillar that you want to bring good things into your life, and that's more like, you know, meditation or prayer, whatever we want to say it. You want to bring things in, and the other side, you want to banish things and get things out. So it's all a process. Someone could walk you through that. You know, they walk you through things like that in the Freemasons and the OTO, especially the OTO. I mean, they should if there's a good teacher, but they don't really have that many good of teachers.
It's good that you mentioned that. One thing I wanted to mention is also in this book on page 65 at the top, Mr. Ford says, let the spirits and shades dance within your mind, filled with the ecstasy of invocation, control and understand the spirit, never surrender complete control. So that is a good point that you made. But yeah, a lot of good stuff. I like everything that we've covered here. Anything else you wanted to bring up about the Goetia before we go ahead and close out?
And it's good because my dog's acting up a little. Hope they got. I mean, a lot of these spirits, they're kind of like animalistic a little bit, you know. So you know, like so it's almost like you're trying to like get a stray dog, or wild coyote and you're being nice to them and giving them things, giving them things, and so then they'll protect you, and they'll do, eventually you can tame. So that's why we have, and this is also, people don't do animal, we used to call it animal husbandry like they used to. So this comes from that, is trying to get along with the animals, trying to get along with the wildlife, working the land. These are just spirits. They're just non-corporeal, non-living, non-being. So I would approach it like an animal trainer to a certain degree. And as an animal trainer, you probably want to figure out not how to get bitten, not how to how animals react. You don't want to maybe you don't want to have a loud horn on or something. I don't know. You got to learn what animal, right? If you're working with a cat, you're probably not going to put a leash on the cat. So you got to learn how the animal reacts. So this is kind of like, you can approach this from that perspective. These spirits, they're not animals. I mean, they could communicate in Latin and stuff like that, but they're still, it's like making friends or charming a crowd or taming an animal. I mean, it depends on the level of the spirit. I mean, if you got some of these spirits, some of these things you would think, you'd want to tame, like these birdmen and all this. I mean, the forms these took. I mean, these are pretty terrifying forms. They are animalistic, and some are half crocodile, and so I mean, they're chimeras, a lot of them. So you want to learn about their animals, learn about who they are, learn about their history, and then you could draw them in, and things will work. The thing will work. A lot of times these spirits are used to having criminals contact them and stuff like that. So some of them. And I found that in the group class. Some guys this spirit is telling me to steal things. So I'm like, yeah, he only deals with criminals. I mean, criminals beg to him or whatever, or petition him so they don't get caught. So so there's a lot of things that this was tied into some back alley stuff. And like I said, this one book, it just tells the spirits and where they fit in the hierarchy. It doesn't even tell you how to do it because they already assume you already are in a secret organization that taught you how to do all this stuff. Yeah. So that's how it is. I mean, we could do a more step-by-step workbook, but I think hopefully this will give a good overview for everybody. So
I think it has. I think we've covered a lot of ground, as a basic talk about the Goetia. We will be bringing out more videos about other stuff and other subjects, maybe offshoots or ramifications of this video. But it's been a nice chat. Everybody, make sure you like and subscribe to Dark Sorcery. Also check us out on Instagram, Dark Sorcery 6669, our Facebook group. Check us out on TikTok. Also check out Guion's stuff below this video. I have all his links to all his pages. It's good having you on again, Guion. Good discussion.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Like and subscribe to Dark Sorcery.